I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Hello to all the scouts and peaches, and Timmy also says hello, right on cue, jumping onto my lap. I hope you're not going to be too comfortable, Timmy. Usually when he gets very, very comfortable, then he farts, so you'll know when that happens. Okay, so we are going to go through 12 questions, and I think what I'm going to try and do is probably going to have to put Timmy down to type this out. We're going to ask 12 questions right in the beginning and see how we do. So ask those 12 questions, and I want you guys to try and answer them, not in chat, but in your notebooks. So it's important that you either write down the answer or write down the question and the answer. And then at the end of the whole thing, the idea is to go through those questions again. Either I can do that with you or you guys can do it on your own and then see what your score is. And hopefully it'll have doubled or tripled. We'll see. So essentially what this live is about, obviously there was no court today, no trial today, and no trial tomorrow. But what we want to try and do is get to know an area that's very tricky in any true crime case, and that is who someone is. And yet there are at least three someones that we need to get to know quite well. Jennifer, who's no longer with us, Fotis, who's no longer with us, and then Michelle Troconis, who's on trial. Like, what is going on? And tomorrow I want to take the narrative even further and kind of deal with Michelle's potential motive. And I don't think it's like, for example, in the Alex Murdoch case, you could say greed is the motive. So in a single word, that might be true, but what is it beyond that? What is the scale of it? What is the context of it? So that's kind of what you want to talk about. So without any further ado, oh, by the way, for those who don't know me, I'm an author of over 100 books. My name's Nick. This is one of them, which I co-authored with Lisa Wilson. I actually got a really nice, I'm not sure if it's a review or just a comment, where I was talking about, I think, the Chris Watts case, and someone was saying what was true once upon a time. There was a point a couple of years ago where I was probably one of the most prolific authors in the world. I mean, I was literally publishing a book every 2 weeks, sometimes about 2 books a month, every month, month after month after month. Not short books either. You can see with this book as well, it's not like a comic book or a kind of like a flimsy little magazine. It's a proper narrative. And yeah, a lot of work and time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears went into those books. What's quite interesting for me is the victim in this case was also someone with literary aspirations. She was into writing plays. She was busy writing a book that was taking years when all of this was going on as well. And so then the question is, what is it like to live with an author? What is it like to be an author living with someone else, in a particular respect? So that's also, I think, quite interesting. Just a quick hello to you guys. Good to see the mods here. Chelsea, good to see you. Steve Shadow, good to see you as well. Is Stephanie here? Hopefully we'll see her a bit later. Maybe we'll see Terry as well. Okay, so there are a couple of TCRS notebooks. You can order this one on, where can you order it from? Teespring, I think, this particular one. And then there's another one that's even, I think it's a little bit nicer. You can order this notebook on Amazon. So the 12 questions that we want to ask and answer are the following. Timmy, I'm going to have to put you down. Okay, sorry. And you're really going to get a benefit out of this if you do take a little bit of effort, get yourself a pen, write this down, and then just check what the answers are. Please don't put your answers in chat. Okay, so the first one is, did the cops, remember there were like trash bags that went into as many as about 30 trash bins, right? Sorry if my eyes look a little bit puffy. I think I've got slight hay fever. But anyway, did the cops find any evidence in those trash cans? And obviously, if the answer is no, it's no. If the answer is yes, well, you've got to be able to say what they did find. So not a random yes/no question. You must be able to motivate your answer. Number two, so that's the first question. Shall I type it out just so it's clear? And I can maybe give you guys a bit of time to write it out. One, did cops find evidence in the trash cans? That's the first one. We're going to look at 12 separate questions. The next one is, how many motions? Remember they were engaged in a custody battle at the time that all of this happened. How many motions were filed during this custody battle, approximately? Okay, that's the second question. I think just to make things slightly more interesting, I'm going to just put up a picture while we are kind of busy with this. And by the way, what's on screen is also one of the questions that we're going to look. Timmy, give me a moment. Number 3, what was the murder weapon? What do the cops think? Okay, that's the third question. Right? Now, obviously, if you're listening to these questions and you're able to give an answer like that, then you probably know the case quite well. If you're thinking about it, well, then you're probably going to learn quite a lot in this. Number 4, Timmy, can you try and just be a bit patient? Number 4, where did, and that's kind of the poll question, I think. Where did Fotis and Jennifer meet? Right, that's question number 4. I want to have a look at how you guys are doing in that poll before we continue. Let's have a look. Um, 60% of you say at Brown, late in Aspen, 23% say Greenwich Village, 12% say in Rome. We all know that, well, Fotis was Greek, right? He wasn't Italian. And then 6% say Central Park. We know that they were sort of living in that sort of area, New York. So New York, Connecticut. So, yeah, a quarter of you say Greenwich Village. That's not a bad answer. 12%, around about an eighth of you say Rome. And then almost 60%, that's gone down slightly, say at Brown, and then later in Aspen. So we're going to see how what the answer is to that question as well. But it is interesting that that's almost 60-40. 60% answered that one, and then 40% kind of for the rest. So, okay. Joe Huck, good to see you. Right, number 5 is how much was Fotis in debt, approximately? And that's like a specific figure. Can you give the specific figure that he was in debt, right? Number 6. How am I going to turn this into a question? I guess, what did Fotis say regarding specific time in prison in his, I don't know, write the unalive word in chat, let's just say in his last note before death. I think you know what I'm referring to. So he wrote a note that starts with the S word, and what did he refer to when he referred to time in that note? Teresa just, so Christina says 2 million, Teresa says also 2 million. That's the wrong answer, but please don't put your answers in chat right now. Those are the wrong answers, both of them, because the idea is to see what we think we know at the beginning and then what we find out by the end of it, and then compare it. In other words, to say, this is the question I'm going to ask you guys. How many questions did you get right in the beginning? So put your answers to these questions right now in your notebooks, and then when we get to the end, we'll ask the questions again, answer them again, and then see how many you get right. Number 7 is quite a strange question, I guess. Did Jennifer own the massive mansion in which she died? Right? Did she own that? That's question number, oh, sorry about that. That's question number 7. Then number 8, we're almost done, and then we'll get going. Number 8, who is Gloria? Who is Gloria? Right, and obviously in your own notebooks, if you're writing this down, write down the answer as far as what you know at this point. Number 9, I guess we can ask it this way. What happened to DULOS's mother? What happened to DULOS's mother? Well, that's the idea, Earth. The idea is to make you realize how much you don't know, right? So, Bayu Babe, again, please don't provide answers in chat. The idea is to test knowledge, so yeah, please don't do that. So please, those of you who are here right now, maybe you've just joined us, we're going to write down 9 questions in our notebooks and write down the answer. You can write, I don't know, or you can write whatever you think the answer is. And then at the end, we're going to do it again and see what the improvement is, okay? So you might say, oh, I got 4 right at the beginning, and I've gotten 11 out of 12 right at the end, or whatever. Maybe you get 12 out of 12 to begin with, okay? So number 10, we've got 3 left. Can't read my own writing. Okay, let's ask it like this. Do we know what Jennifer was wearing when she was killed? And that's kind of a double question. If the answer is yes, you need to be able to say what it was. Okay. That's good to hear, Joe. I'm glad I was able to be of some comfort to you and company. Okay, so that's question 10. Do we know what Jennifer was wearing? It's quite an interesting question when you go into it. Number 11. Did the authorities find a freshly dug hole anywhere? And what was next to it? So I know a question like that, it's easy to say yes. Well, okay, if that's a guess, then what was next to that hole? Okay, so remember the question is surrounding this whole case. What happened to Jennifer DULOS? That they've never been able to find her remains, and her husband, who's now deceased, was in construction. He had a construction company, and so you kind of have a situation of where could she foreseeably have been buried or disposed of. And so is there anything about a hole that was found, something that was excavated in the narrative surrounding this? If so, what did they find right next to it? Okay, so that's 11, and then the 12th question is, did Michelle, the mistress, have any children? Yeah, that's, I guess, it. Did Michelle have any children? And remember, what you're going to talk about tomorrow is a potential motive that she could have had, right? So did Michelle have any children? So I'm going to quickly go through all 12 questions, just review them very, very quickly, starting with, where's the first one? Did the cops find evidence in the trash cans? How many motions were filed during the custody phase of their divorce and during the whole divorce thing? What was the murder weapon? What do the police think? So that's kind of a double question. It's kind of, what do you think was the murder weapon? What do the police think? And on screen right next to me says there that DULOS bought a 9mm Glock. And it's quite important to know when that was bought. Could that be the murder weapon? Where did Fotis and Jennifer meet? Right, and that's part of the poll question. Let's have a look. So far, 60% are saying at Brown, 21% say Greenwich Village, 12% say Rome, 7% say Central Park. Okay, then the next one, how much was Fotis in debt? That's a specific number. Number 6, what did Fotis say regarding specific time in prison in his last note before death? Okay, number 7, did Jennifer own the massive mansion in which she died? Who is Gloria? What happened to DULOS's mother? Where's number 10? Do we know what Jennifer was wearing when she was killed? If you answer yes, then you've got to say what it was. Number 11, did the authorities find a freshly dug hole anywhere, and what is next to it? And then the final question is, did Michelle have any children? So where the wind blows says yes and I don't know. Please don't answer the questions in chat right now. You've got a chance to do that at the end of everything. Where the wind blows says I must have missed a couple of videos. Sergeant George, please also don't answer questions in chat. Okay, so we're gonna go right to the beginning with, did the cops find evidence in the trash cans? Did the cops find evidence in the trash cans? Now, what's so amazing about this particular case is how many tentacles, intertextual tentacles, it seems to send out into all sorts of other cases that are similar. And you feel that either the murderer in this case got lots of ideas from other cases, or other cases got lots of ideas from him subsequent. So in terms of Barry Morphew, remember the question now is, did the cops find evidence in the trash? In the Barry Morphew case, so in both cases, they had CCTV of these disposal runs. Barry did at least 5, just throwing away trash, whereas Fotis did something like put trash in 30 different receptacles. And so the question is, let's say in the Barry Morphew case, you're allowed to answer this in chat. Did they find any evidence in those trash receptacles? Kimchi says, I have no idea. Normally, Kimchi knows quite a lot about what we're talking about. Any thoughts? By the way, I see a lot of you are really cold where you are. January tends to be the coldest month, I think, in the northern hemisphere. It's also typically the warmest month in the southern, where I am. It's been not very hot so far this January. Today was pretty hot, though. Anyway, I hope you guys are keeping warm. Zircon says, does that include the sewer? Good question. It seems like you do know the case quite well. So we are going to get to that. What I'm simply trying to show at this point is there is quite a lot of discrepancy. Although there's similarities between cases, there's some differences. What is quite astonishing in this case is how much evidence was actually recovered in these trash receptacles. The question is, what were they, and what does that tell us? That's right. As far as I know, and I don't know if we know all the information, but as far as I know, they didn't find any, in the Barry Morphew case, they didn't find any evidence in the trash. Joe says, I'm in Portland, Oregon. It's raining, hailing, freezing, lights blinking. Okay. Yeah, no, they weren't, as far as I know, they weren't able to find any evidence. I think there was a trash run shortly afterwards. So it would be interesting to know the day that Barry Morphew did the trash run and the day that the trash was collected in Colorado, because I know in the Chris Watts case, Chris Watts threw trash away on the Monday, and then there was an automatic trash run the next morning, Tuesday morning. And I also know that based in being in Frederick on a Tuesday when they were collecting trash, with trash trucks were moving through the neighborhood. Okay, so let's kind of get going. So as I said, the point of this live is actually just to get to know the people in this case, but also to some extent the fabric of this case. So one kind of interesting dimension to pull on, it's like a thread that you pull on, is the dimension of, let's call it sport, right? This should have been another question, but I'll give this one to you guys for free. And I must say, it's fascinating in the Madeleine McCann case. If you pull on the thread of, let's just say, sport, in that case it's football, what kind of comes out of that if you keep pulling on that thread? So in this case, what would you say is the sport thread in this case? What do you think is the sport thread? what is the most important sport that Fotis and the DULOS family were involved in, right? And that's kind of the central question that I really want to get at, because it's dealing with this idea of how did Fotis get to the crime scene? Remember, if he left in the Chevy Suburban, that big black truck with Jennifer's body in it, right? If he left in that truck and she arrived in that truck, then how did he get there? I mean, surely another vehicle would have been left there. Well, he didn't get there in the Range Rover, and there didn't seem to be any other car parked there. So we want to kind of deal with that. And even if you know the answer to that, the question is, how does that tie in with this guy? Okay, so there's a really good answer. He rode his bike to her house. But the original question is, what sport was Fotis really interested in and the rest of the family? That's really the kind of the 13th question. Matt Prince says, were they tennis players? Laney says, did he cycle? There you go. That's the answer. Water sports. So what's quite interesting when you read the Vanity Fair article, it seems like they were just kind of interested in water skiing, right? But the question is, to what extent were they interested in water skiing? Was it a little bit or a lot? And the answer is a heck of a lot, to like the world championship level, right? And anyone who's interested in sport to a world championship level like that is physically fit, and they tend to be fit in other ways as well. Maybe they jog quite often, maybe they cycle quite often, right? And you can almost imagine when it's winter in New York, and you probably wouldn't want to water ski. What would be another way to keep fit? Or maybe cycling. So let's have a look at some images on cycling. Sorry, on water skiing. Now, one of the big questions whenever you're dealing with true crime is, whatever the thing you're dealing with, you need to know how it fits in, how that puzzle piece fits in with everything else. And one of the first things to ask is, well, how big is this puzzle piece? So if we're talking about water skiing, is it a small little puzzle piece and there are lots of other puzzle pieces and some are bigger? Or is it, what's the word? Is it proportionately a very big puzzle piece and a lot of the other little pieces fit in around that? And so what do you guys think? Do you think the water skiing puzzle piece is a small puzzle piece, a medium puzzle piece, or a large puzzle piece? I see we've got someone who wants to jump the gun and provide all the information before we get to it. Try and stick, Erica, try and stick to the questions we're asking at the time that we're asking it. Otherwise, you're going to kind of spoil the thing I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to, through a long arc where we learn a lot of information, we get to answers at the end. Otherwise, I can make this a 10-minute thing where we just give the answers and we don't really learn anything, and we're not curious, and then we can all go home. We can do it that way as well. Sorry if I sound a bit snarky. Yeah, so it's a very big piece. And just by looking at these images, look at this photo. It's a better image than the last one. Come on. You're starting to get an idea that this guy really is quite a professional. You can see he's not just skiing to have fun. He's kind of doing a slalom there. He's going around a buoy, right? Some of you would say buoy. He's going around a buoy, and to me it looks like he's skiing on one ski over there, right? So this is a guy who is obviously very good at skiing, and also, how can I put it? He probably spends a lot of time in it. So the one thing to look at, you can say the water skiing puzzle piece is big, but what does that mean? Well, I think one thing you can't get away from is that in order to be this good and in order to compete at a world championship level, not only himself, but many of the DULOS children, it means that he's got to spend a lot of time on it, almost like a professional sportsman, right? Maybe even not almost, but like a professional sportsman. Another criminal who was very caught up in professional sports was Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson thought he might become a world champion golfer, and he was quite a good golfer when he gave that up and became kind of a normal dude trying to make it in the suburbs. So here are a couple of additional photos of Fotis water skiing. And again, there you can see he's skiing on one ski. You can see there's kind of a glamorous aspect to it. He's almost like a surfer. He's quite muscular. He's quite, he's kind of the hero that is going, left and right and strutting his stuff. I must say my father could do this. He could ski on one ski. My father had a ski boat as well. It is definitely quite a glamorous sort of sport, almost like polo. There's certain sports that are definitely more expensive and more glamorous. And we know Oscar Pistorius was also someone with ski boats. He had a very bad crash with it. I think there was a lot of alcohol lying in the boat. So Oscar Pistorius was also, I don't know if he was skiing, but he was certainly with people who were skiing or using these boats. And the central question when you look at all of these photos is, well, what about Jennifer? Was Jennifer water skiing? Was Jennifer part of this universe? And what do you think the answer is? What do you think the answer is? So let me put this in another way. Fotis was very into water skiing. He actually spent, at a certain point, 10 days a month where he was out water skiing. And the kids were also trained to become, they were like water skiing world champions, like at age 14 or whatever it is. And so now you've got Fotis and the kids that are going around the world, attending these world championship skiing events. And how do you think Jennifer fitted into that? Now, bear in mind, she's a literary kind of person. She's someone who likes plays and writing and things like that. Does she strike you as kind of a water skier? Was she part of this water skiing adventure? And the answer is no. And so at the same time that you say, was the water skiing bringing this couple closer together, or was it driving a wedge between them? And another way of answering that is, you could say that Fotis was just a guy who liked to have fun. He was an outdoors dude, and this is an answer to the first question. They did meet in Aspen. They had originally met at university in Brown University, and then they met in Aspen. And you can put this note on your 12 questions. And I think they were there. She was there to ski. I don't know this for a fact, but I assume he was there snow skiing, and she was there snow skiing. And so it's not that Jennifer wasn't sporty whatsoever. She probably did keep fit. But the thing is, she wasn't that into sport that it was an all-encompassing thing. Like skiing was maybe just one little dimension of her literary life, right? In other words, it's quite a relatively small piece of her puzzle. Whereas in terms of Fotis, it was a big piece of that puzzle. It was a big piece of his life. And so you kind of have this in three dimensions. And the three dimensions are, in terms of just the water skiing, how much did the water skiing suck Fotis into it, and the DULOS children into it, and at the same time was that pushing Jennifer away, where she realized, wow, I'm not really into it that much, and the kids can't talk about anything else, blah blah blah. And so, and then also at the same time, how does the water skiing playing into Michelle Troconis? Did Michelle Troconis water ski at all? What was Michelle Troconis's sporting background, pedigree, whatever? And on paper, if you put them next to each other, Michelle Troconis and Jennifer DULOS, Jennifer Faber, which one was more into sport on the one hand and also into water skiing on the other? And if you put them together and you had Fotis on the other side saying, okay, between these two women, which one is more present at water skiing events and participating in water skiing events? What do you think is the answer? And so in a very simple way, if you just pull on the thread of the sport narrative, in this case, water skiing, it starts to unravel all sorts of other areas. Because one of the things we're trying to figure out is, how did the marriage start to go sour? And then at the same time, what is Michelle's role in this? And to what extent was he the right woman for Fotis? Like, in what area was a fairy tale emerging between the two of them that was becoming a nightmare for Jennifer, right? Does that make sense? And so the answer is, let me show you in a photo rather than giving you the answer. So the question is, how did Fotis and Michelle meet? What do you think is the answer to that? How do you think Fotis and Michelle met? Well, isn't it obvious? At one of these events. And did you know that Michelle's job was, she was a ESPN sports presenter for I think some South American television channel. And so you can imagine that she could have met Fotis simply by interviewing him, right? You can see he's the winner in that particular event. She would have conceivably met him simply by interviewing him, and there she is on ESPN presenting. And so the question is, if she was a ESPN presenter, was she also someone who did sports herself? And what do you think the answer is? And so she would do things like, there she is playing polo. I think she was kind of like a horse whisperer, or she used horses as therapy. You can imagine that's quite expensive as well. And there's your answer. There she is at the 2018 something championships. Let's just put this up. She's at some water skiing championships. You can see there's a medal around her neck. And although she's got a polo cap on, it looks like, there's a water ski right next to her. So I don't think she was using that in the polo championships as the club. I think that was a skiing championships. And so that's something they had in common. They met through water skiing, and they had a lot more in common in water skiing, and that became their fairy tale. She joined Fotis in his water skiing fairy tale, and Jennifer wasn't part of that. Another thing to consider is, if you are so obsessively water skiing, and I mean, you probably do need to do it, you need to be obsessive about it to become a world champion. Well, then if you're doing it 10 days per month, right, then when are you actually working? Like, if you've got a business to run, if you've got a construction company, and you're spending a third of your time at events somewhere else, like at 10 days a month, he would just literally be somewhere else, then how much time are you actually working? Also, if you've got to train for these events, how much time are you training, right, for these events. And you can imagine all of that plays into this thing of why he needed so much money and why he was in so much debt, right? Does that make sense? So do you think he was in a little bit of debt? Like, do you think he owed like $1 million or $2 million? Or do you think he owed closer to double that, $5 million? Do you think he owed around about $5 million? Or do you think he owed, let's say, double that? So do you think it was, if the water skiing thing was this huge piece of the puzzle, the flip side to that, who is paying the bill for this? Who is paying? Because I don't know if I really don't know if water skiing pays the bills. Like, if you a world champion water skier, do you get a lot of money for it? I just literally don't know. But someone had to pay for the trips, the training, the boats, and then the kids going through it as well. And who was paying for that, right? Okay, yeah, so that is the answer, 7 million. That is the answer. Please try and not provide the answer at this point. We want to go through the 12 questions at the end and provide the answer. So there's a freebie for everyone. That's the answer. He was $7 million in debt, right? And you can imagine if he owed $7 million, that he would be kind of in a desperate straits. My wife has got a lot of money. I want to water ski. I need my wife somehow to pay this money, even though we're not getting along, right? Okay, so let's continue. What other photos have I got here? So that's quite I think, poignant photo of Jennifer DULOS. Her life is fairly dull, in the sense that she's taking the kids to school, she's looking after the school activities. Her life is really just surrounding the kids. Her kind of life is on the back burner. Even the books that she's writing is in a drawer, and she's kind of taking care of the kids. Meanwhile, her husband is having these adventures with the kids. He's having all the fun time. So he doesn't maybe take them to school or do that aspect. He takes them on adventures water skiing, and he's their water skiing coach and all that kind of thing. And so even the kids kind of have a particular experience with dad, which is exciting, but it's also pressured. There's a lot of competition and training and discipline involved. Whereas with their mother, they have a kind of a different experience. And then also on whose side do the kids want to be? Also, if there's a divorce, who gets custody in a situation where the one parent has got quite a lot of money and can provide for them, whereas the other parent wants them to continue their world championship careers, I guess. He's put so much work into the kids. He wants them to continue with those careers, but who's going to pay for that? And you can imagine if Jennifer says, I don't want the kids to be professional water skiers, and that they're not enjoying it either. You can imagine that creates serious feelings of resentment and hatred between various members of the family, right? Laney says he had illusions of grandeur. Okay. That definitely does seem to be the case, Matt. It does seem to be the case. But are you starting to feel a sense of, it's starting to make sense, the tensions that were going on between the couple, and also how the third person who comes along, Michelle Troconis, is attractive to, she's attractive in terms of Fotis in many ways. She's someone that he can go on these trips with. She's someone that understands water skiing. She's someone that can promote him and market him and write stories about him and get him to where he wants to go, right? And you can also see how the kids are going to be pulled the one way and the other way, right? But I do think that just this competition, the fact that he wants to win, he doesn't just want to water ski and have fun. He wants to compete at the highest level. He wants to win these competitions. He wants his kids to compete. He wants them to win. And somewhere along the line are some really interesting comments that she makes about this, where she says he can't lose. Well, if he can't lose, like if he might take part in a water skiing thing and come second and throw things around the house or lose his temper, whatever. I don't know exactly what it might be, but if he can't lose that, can he lose a divorce thing, right? Can he? Is he willing to lose in a courtroom situation? Remember, I think it was yesterday we spoke about what influences the Greek culture have in this. Now, I don't really know whether I don't know the Greek culture well enough to say. I know a couple of Greeks in my life. I can't really say that they don't like losing any more than I don't like losing. I don't know if that's a thing. Um, I'm trying to think about the people I know. I wouldn't really say that is a thing, but certainly with this particular individual, um, he really didn't like losing, which was plain to see in water skiing. He really didn't like losing um, in in a custody battle in court, and then he really didn't like losing in terms of a murder trial, right? And that's quite a good example of, okay, you've committed murder, we've caught you, well, you're now going to go to trial and you're going to lose. How do you feel about that? What do you think he did in response to that? And that, I think, is the best description of all of someone who doesn't like losing. In other words, it's someone who there's so many of these motions going on. This court battle goes on for 2 years, divorce, about money, about custody, and he just can't lose. He doesn't want to lose, right? And so how does he deal with that? He just can't lose. He doesn't want to lose, but he can tell that he is losing. So how does he deal with that, right? And then after that, after killing Jennifer, is it going to go to court again and he's facing losing his whole life? But he just can't lose. How does he deal with that? Is it starting to make sense? Is it starting to make sense? And I've got to say, I don't use the word narcissist very often. As far as I'm concerned, it's used far too frequently in true crime. I do feel like I can make an exception with Fotis DULOS. I do get the feeling that he's a very spoiled, a particularly spoiled individual who really does want his cake and eat it. And there's a certain amount of narcissism where you might want certain things the way you want them, but that's not that different from a lot of other people. Here is someone who wants a big business and to live in a big house, and he wants to water ski, but he doesn't really want to pay the bills. He doesn't want to do the work in the proper way, right? And that is really a narcissist. Mel Max says narcissistic personalities hate losing. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a couple more images here. Let's see if I can. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. So what's really interesting, also something that I came across just in my research, was this is Jennifer's house, and it looks pretty impressive, doesn't it? Looks pretty impressive. Well, the house that Fotis was living in was probably 3 times bigger. I'm not kidding when I say that. It's really a huge house. Do I have it here? Can't quite see. It's not that one. So that's Fotis and Michelle. We've seen that one. Okay, that's another picture of Jennifer's home. And one of the questions was, did she own this home? Did Jennifer own this home? Anyone know the answer? And as big as that house is, she was murdered in this area. There's a trash can over there. She was murdered in this area. You can see how it's surrounded by by trees. It looks like there's a house over here and a house over there. This garage, I would love to know. Looks like there's a garden over here. I'd love to know if there's line of sight this way into the house. But it does look like there's a structure here and a structure there. I'm looking for the screen grab that I took of Fotis's house. I wonder if where I've got it. Unfortunately, sometimes when you get a lot of photos on Gmail, it only shows you the first couple. That's why I can't see them here. So that's the 4 group. I think I'm quite close to it. But that was something that she said, is that he must win at all costs. And that is, first of all, do you think that that is true? Do you think that's true of Fotis DULOS? When she said that, was she correct? Was she being truthful, or was it just something that was said in bitterness? All I'm trying to do is just find the image of the house that he was living in. How long is that going to take? Is it going to be the last photo that I open? Okay. I think maybe the better way of doing this is just like this. Okay, no. There it is. Okay. So can you see the house that he's living in is much bigger than the house that she's living in? And yet he's really paid for it through her money, right? And to make things even crazier, let's just try and go back to her house. Sorry, it's not. I'm not quite as streamlined as I'd like to be. Let's try and, so if you try and keep that in your mind, keep that picture in your mind. Look at the size of just that section, and then it's pulls out into that section, pulls out into that section, and then there's that. I would say this house is at least twice the size of the house that she's staying in. There's her house, right? So this section is quite big, and then there's just that little piece behind it, right? But do you agree in principle that this house is smaller than that house, right? And so the crazy part is he's living in this house, and here's the answer, $7 million in debt. And she's living in this house. She's the one with all the money, really. Her family's got far more money and resources. She's living in this house, and guess what? She's renting the house. She doesn't even own the house. She's renting the house. That's the extent to which he has, it looks like, destroyed the financial situation that they've been in through living extremely extravagantly. I mean, let me ask you the question. If you've got 5 kids, should you be spending 10 days a month in water skiing championships going around the world, and you $7 million in debt? should you be living in a house of this size if you $7 million in debt? And I think it's very hard to avoid asking this. If you were Michelle Troconis, would you like to live in this house? Would you kind of go along with the guy who's living in this house? And you've also got a child. And maybe you like horse riding, and maybe you like not just horse riding, but using horses as a kind of therapy. Aren't you going to need a place that's got stables? And I don't know if that is a stable, but I wouldn't be surprised if a huge estate like this has stables or some kind of estate associated with it. Just have a look at what Alf says. Thanks for that. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to take you guys through now is some of the narrative. The email that I need is this one. And how this whole the idea of this live came about was when I saw this image. What do you think that is an image of? And you're allowed to answer this. You're allowed to give your thoughts or knowledge. You have my permission. What do you guys think that is a picture of? Have you ever seen that before? Thanks a lot, Michelle. Have you ever seen that picture before? So that is supposed to be, that's CCTV of someone riding a bike, and they're speculating that is Fotis DULOS, right? And what's really interesting in the John Benet Ramsey case, there's a bicycle narrative that I believe is really important and very underestimated. And a lot of people will say, ha, 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 whatever. I don't know why are you talking about bicycles? The same thing applies right here. There's a bicycle narrative in this case. You might say, I don't really want to be talking about that. Let's talk about the case. Well, it looks like Fotis got to the crime scene on a bicycle, and in other words, he got there by bicycle, committed the crime, and then took the bicycle with Jennifer DULOS in the Chevy, right? So Jennifer's dead body is in the back of the Chevy Suburban, and so is this bicycle. And so if you think about it, if you're disposing of evidence, you're disposing of clothing, you're disposing of, let's call it paper rolls, right? All sorts of things that you've used to clean up evidence. And the bicycle was taken to the crime scene, and the bicycle is, let's say, placed on the victim. Would you take the bicycle home and put it back where you always had it? In other words, is the bicycle absent from where it used to be? And it's the same question I asked in the John Benet Ramsey case. How many bicycles are in the story at the beginning? How many bicycles are in the story at the end, right? So that kind of addresses the question, how did he get there? And the answer, how did he get to Jennifer's house? And the answer is by bicycle. And he also gets the evidence, or instead of parking a car there and leaving it, he puts the bicycle in the vehicle and removes that evidence as well when he leaves. But then what does he do with the bicycle after that? And I do think there's a possible, how can I put this? Whatever happened to the bicycle is possibly similar to what happened to Jennifer, right? A bicycle is quite a big thing, difficult to cart around, also quite difficult evidence to get rid of. So whatever happened to the bicycle is possibly a clue to what happened to Jennifer. Do you agree with that? And if we're going to talk about Jennifer's clothing and the clothing that she was found, well, what about the clothing that is worn by this bicycle rider? Was anything like that found at the crime scene? What do you think? So I'm going to show you another photo that gives you just slightly better context of the CCTV, and that's this one. So you can see there's a perimeter wall, there's some shrubbery, there's the road going by, and there's this person on a bicycle. And so let's go to the affidavit. And I must have, I found this fascinating. The bicycle. Pavel Gumeni told investigators he was aware that DULOS owned an older model black or brown bicycle. And so again, what color is, can I go back to that? What color was that bicycle we looked at? Which he had brought with him when he moved to the United States. So this bicycle's got a lot of sentimental value for him. DULOS told Gumeni the bike was made in France and was his childhood bicycle. DULOS had asked Gumeni to fix the bicycle during the fall of 2018 or the beginning of 2019. So the crime was committed, if you recall, in May 2019. And so this guy has a interaction with the bicycle. He repairs it, maybe at a flat tire. And DULOS asked Gumeni to fix the bicycle. Then he remembered the bicycle had been routinely stored on a hook in the garage at 4 Jefferson Crossing. That's at, I think, where that huge mansion is. Let me just confirm that. It's not the office, right? It's where he stayed. I mean, it's natural to assume that, but yeah. 4 Jefferson Crossing, that is this house. Really is a huge, huge house. So that's where the bicycle lived. It's a place that's worth 2.5 million. And as I say, he was 7 million in debt. Let's just see what they say. Does it have any horse riding facilities? So it says here, French doors open to a family room, 6 bedrooms. Nothing about the gardens. 2.27 acres. But maybe there's some horse riding facilities in the area. But anyway, that is where he kept his bicycle. During interview number 3, Troconis reported seeing such a bicycle at 80 Mountain Spring Road. As far as I know, that's where their offices are, right? When detectives showed Troconis photos of the interior of 4 Jefferson Crossing garage taken on the 3rd of June, so about 10 days, just over a week after the crime, she indicated that DULOS's bicycle was missing from the photo. Right? Troconis pointed out the empty hook where DULOS's bike normally hanged. Evidence recovered from the Albany Avenue trash receptacles. Okay, so here we have early confirmation that they did find evidence in the trash, right? Well, guess what it included? A logo consistent with a vintage Mercier brand bicycle. A French-made bicycle consistent with Gumeni's description. Detectives located photographs taken in 2008 at a residence shared by Jennifer and Fotis that showed a dark-colored vintage bicycle consistent with a Mercier bicycle. On the day of Jennifer's disappearance, residential surveillance footage on Weed Street, New Canaan, showed an individual dressed in a hooded sweatshirt and dark clothing, riding a bicycle consistent with DULOS's bike towards Jennifer's residence. Now, if you were at the beginning of this case and you were reading about water skiing, the thing that you'd need to be thinking about as an investigator is what role does sport play, physical fitness, not average physical fitness, not basically just how relevant is this physical aspect to the case? And when you're talking about a perpetrator who's a world champion water skier, just like O.J. Simpson is not a world champion, but certainly a elite class footballer, then you've got to ask, how physical is the crime that's been committed? Let me ask that question again. When you're dealing with a elite athlete or a very high level athlete, a very fit person, to what extent is the crime physical? Meaning, did someone run around? Is the crime itself physical? In other words, not shooting, but using a knife. To what extent is the perpetrator using his physicality to move from A to B? And the answer in this particular case is big time. It looks like the perpetrator got on his bicycle, something he did as a child, and used that to get to the scene. Now, it's very integral to his life as a person, right? It's part of his childhood, it's part of who he is. But if you don't know who he is, you wouldn't know that. So, and I must say, the fact that he would use this bicycle, and he brought this bicycle all the way from France, and it's in the fabric of the family photos, indicates to me what an idiotic criminal this guy is. He thinks he's very clever. He thinks he's what's the word? Very crafty, and he can outsmart other people. But actually, it's one of the dumbest crimes I've actually seen, in a sense. He goes to all this effort to be very, very clever, but then he makes lots of stupid mistakes on the way, right? It is interesting, right? Okay, I love it when my followers use TCRS isms. Okay, so don't you find that? Don't you guys find that quite interesting? And so that brings us to this question. So, what was the murder weapon? What was the murder weapon? What do you guys think the murder weapon was? Okay, I think I'm going to need to close all of these. Oh, damn, I'll just... What do you guys think the murder weapon was? Well, we know, and this is important, we know that he bought a 9mm Glock, right? But can you guys see that? But a 9mm Glock doesn't really match the profile of the type of person we're dealing with. And the profile we're dealing with is an athletic person, someone who, let's say, backs his own physicality, almost like Chris Watts did. He backs himself in a person-to-person tussle. Do you agree? So, question 12, well, let's put it this way. Of the 12 questions, the question dealing with what is the murder weapon, well, nobody knows. So you can't technically, you can't score 12 out of 12 out of this, because we don't know absolutely what the answer is to this question. But in terms of this discussion, I would say there's strong evidence that the Glock is the murder weapon, right? But I think there's stronger evidence that it wasn't, when you get to know the person that was supposedly wielding it. And the stronger evidence is there was no sound of a gunshot. The type of crime seems to be there's a lot of blood all over the place. I don't know if you know, there was blood found in the bedroom, the master bedroom. There's blood found on the faucet in the kitchen, and then obviously quite a lot of blood found right throughout the garage. And the fact that it took 30 receptacles to get rid of all the evidence also indicates that there was a lot of blood. And we know in the Patrick Frazee case, Crystal Kenny went into that crime scene and she filled up 5 or 6 garbage bags with bloodied rags, 5 or 6, right? And that was a horrible crime that didn't involve a gunshot. I'm not saying gunshots don't involve blood loss, but a knife wound certainly involves a lot more than a gunshot. Obviously, it depends on where the knife is used, but I think the other thing to bear in mind is when you're dealing with a crime like this, I've got a feeling the perpetrator actually wants to injure and inflict pain on his victim. In other words, it's not a case that he wants to kill her, but he also wants to kill her in a particular way. He wants to get bloody satisfaction out of what he's doing, right? And it's so interesting in a macabre way how similar this case is to the Kimberly Singer case. Remember, with Kimberly Singer, she killed 2 of her children, and she was in the middle of a custody battle herself. And so that's certainly intertextual. But do you know how many motions were discussed and issued in this case? 300 motions in 2 years. Now, if you had to average that per month, I don't know how many that is per month, but it's a few. And it was obviously a very ugly custody battle, and Fotis wanted his revenge for it. He wanted revenge for all the times that he was dragged into court when he could have been training, all the times he was dragged into court when he could have been participating, all the times where he came second or third or didn't even reach the podium because of this drawn-out custody battle, right? And so he not only wanted a release from that, from these strings that had tied him up in knots. He wanted revenge. So it's not just about money; it's also about revenge for this pain that you've caused me. But what's fascinating is in the same way that he tries to just get himself out of the knots that he's in terms of the debt and in terms of the custody, when he's caught for committing murder, he tries to get out of it in the same way, right? Does it make sense that the same way that he tries to get out of the fabric of his marriage and the aftermath by killing someone, he tries to get out of his own responsibility for committing the murder, right? By taking his own life. And in respect to that, he said, I refuse to spend 1 hour in jail for a crime I didn't commit, right? In other words, he's someone who really is a narcissist. He's like, I'm not going to pay for this. I'm not going to experience this. I want my water skiing fairy tale. Is it starting to make a lot more sense to you than in the beginning? And do you guys agree that the murder weapon was very likely a knife, which hasn't been found, still hasn't been found? So in this really excellent article from Vanity Fair, the author writes the following. In these posts, her conflict with DULOS comes out between the lines. She wrote, Don't be number two to anybody. That's what my father always told me. It's hard for girls now, women, wives, mothers. It's hard to know this for real. So when she says a thing like that, don't be number two, she's obviously talking about Fotis, and she's talking about, look at what he's doing. He's living in this huge house that costs 2.5 million. She's renting a house. Although she's really got all the assets in this equation, she's living, although she's living large herself, she's living less large than what he is. He certainly cannot afford to be living as large as he is, being $7 million in debt. The interesting thing about that debt is some of that was legal bills. Some of the $7 million was paying for the most expensive lawyers in town, while you've got someone else also paying for the most expensive lawyers, and there are 300 motions going on. And if the doulos is lost, bear in mind he lost his life, she lost her life. Who do you think won in this equation? Who do you think won? I can't help thinking that the lawyers made a fortune out of this couple. And I don't think it's by mistake that a lawyer is also implicated in this case in some way. There's a lawyer who is also thought to be an accessory of sorts. And then you've got to ask why. Like, why in this case could a lawyer be involved in the actual criminal aspect to it? Well, isn't the answer obvious? Because there's a shitload of money to be stolen, to be taken. And the same way that a lawyer on the sidelines would be looking at these enormous houses, these Gatsby scale places these people are living in, and a Gatsby type lifestyle, except it's water skiing. I wonder whether Michelle Troconis wasn't looking on from the sidelines thinking the same thing. Well, if I keep rubbing shoulders with this person, this life could be mine. Leah says everyone's the loser, not the lawyers. The lawyers definitely made hay out of this story. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Okay. Also, in terms of this article, I just want to bring up another photo. That's her when she was a child, well, a younger person. That's her and her dad. So her dad had said to her, don't be treated second. And what's quite interesting is her father is a very traditional guy. And because he was such a traditional guy, he wanted to help Fotis look after his daughter. So her father gave Fotis quite a lot of money, but like within a patriarchal thing where dad plays the role of the hero and tries to make the patriarch of the next family also the strong provider, except didn't realize what a spoiled brat he was and what a narcissist he was, right? That's right. That's a good point. Jennifer was Fotis's second wife. He'd already been married. In fact, he was dealing with the aftermath of his first marriage when he was in Aspen. Very expensive. Okay. So these are her words. She wrote about the conflict. She said, I wish I were a stronger person and that confrontation did not both scare and appall me. And so you can imagine if you married to someone who is confrontational, bullying, must win at all costs, and you someone who doesn't like confrontation, a little bit like Chris Watts, maybe not a good example, then then you're going to allow, in a way, that person to bully you and become and come second. And so obviously Jennifer was bullied. She's bullied into staying in this relatively smaller house. She's bullied in the sense that even her kids are being taken away on these water skiing adventures, and who's paying for it? And she eventually realizes, I am second in this, and that's not on. And so she goes to war with this guy who won't accept coming second, right? And that is how he reacts. I'm not going to come second in this. If I can't win the legal battle, I'll win the illegal battle, right? And so when she presents herself, when she fights back, when she says, I'm not going to be second, that is what, I guess, in a way, causes Fotis to snap. She also writes, I just need quiet, calm, and peace. I think Timmy treats me as ASMR. Like when I do a live like this is gold. This is like 2 or 3 hours of master's ASMR. I'm going to sleep like a baby now because I'm just going to hear my master's voice in the background. I'm actually even going to feel my master's voice. Now, I can definitely identify with this. Over the course of writing about 100 books, and I'm someone who can get quite emotional, be quite competitive. But if there's one thing that I felt was like my number one priority when I was writing all these books was I need a stable environment. And so literally if I had friends or girlfriends or ex-girlfriends or even family members that were I don't know how to put it, being dramatic, being creating drama. In other words, in a situation where there's no tension, someone just instantly creates an argument. I would try to basically just avoid that. I would avoid communicating with them just in order to work, just in order to have the mental space where you can concentrate and you can hold a line of thought. Because if there's one thing that's destructive to the literary process, it's emotional conflict. It draws a lot of your attention into this very ragged thing, and it draws a lot of energy into that as well. And so I can understand Jennifer just trying to, even if she was very unhappy with what is being done or what is being said, she would just try and avoid it. And guess what happens when you do that? The other person takes that as a opportunity to turn the screws in even more. Instead of just letting sleeping dogs lie, that's a reference to you, Jimmy. Instead of letting sleeping dogs lie, instead of this person saying, I'm not going to engage with you, they take that as an opportunity to turn the screws in even more, to take more advantage than they already are. And unfortunately, that is how a lot of people are, is when you give them a space, then instead of them leaving that space open, they then take that space as well. And when Jennifer looked again, she was second in her own life. And it's because of the person that she was, the sort of literary personality. And then she decided, okay, I'm not going to be treated second anymore. And I kind of had a similar thing like that. I stay in a complex, and I planted a garden and so on. And when I looked again, and I don't really engage with people a lot. I'm working a lot. I'm sort of busy with my own thing. I don't like look over the neighbor's fence and take notes of what I can complain about. And so in that space, when I looked again, I was getting a lot of complaints. And bear in mind, I'm an author, so it's not like I'm playing loud music or having parties or anything like that. When I looked again, everyone had, or not everyone, but a lot of people had found things to complain about. And the next thing, when I woke up, trees were being sawed down left, right, and center. And so I kind of came out of my um, place, my cave, I guess, and I confronted the guy who was doing this. And I just said, and I don't want to confront him, but he's kind of forced my hand. And I just said, look, if you want to cut down another tree, you can, but just ask me before you do it. Maybe you can just, instead of cutting the whole thing down, you can just cut down a few branches. And he was very, oh, I'm so sorry. I definitely will talk to you. And then just literally a couple of days later, he did it again. And then I confronted him and I just said, listen, yeah, I thought we spoke about this. If you want to do this, I'm not saying you can't do it, but just tell me. And then, and then he did it again. And that is when I got really, really angry. And I can understand Jennifer going through the same thing, is because you're not confronting a person regularly, when you do confront them, they're shocked. That they're used to kind of walking all over you. And so when you do say this, it's enough now, they're shocked. They're like, I can't believe you talking to me like this. I'm used to running around doing what I want to do, even if it's in your garden, cutting down your trees. Do you follow what I'm saying? In other words, a non-confrontational personality like that can give another person, a narcissistic person, a sense of free reign. And then it's a shock when that person is awakened, right? Out of the, whatever you want to call it, the place where they kind of spend their time. Does it make sense? And that is what I think happened with Fotis and Jennifer. And then he didn't realize he didn't realize what he was doing. And ultimately, he felt the only way of controlling the situation, the only way of winning the situation is killing this person. So she said, besides, I need quiet, peace, and calm. She said, they are so very lucky monks. They're the same gender. They don't have to worry about misunderstandings. And I must say that is quite understating probably what she was going through. Just calling it a misunderstanding is quite understating. That's well said. It's a long fall off a high horse. That I think is what was going on with Fotis. She was giving inches and inches and inches, and he had run away for miles, and he couldn't come back down to earth after a while. He was living in an artificial reality spun with somebody else's money, right? Okay, so if we go a little bit further through this article, I just want to get to that. So I don't know if it's clear. The way Fotis seemed to do this was he drove the red Toyota Tacoma, which belonged to that other guy. He rode that vehicle to the nature preserve, right, with a bicycle in it. Then he got out the bicycle and cycled to Jennifer's home, committed the crime, drove from there back to the preserve, and then transferred the body and the bicycle to the Toyota Tacoma, and then left the area. And I think that's one reason why, if I remember correctly, the Alpha's gifted 5 True Crime Rocket Science memberships. Thanks a lot, Alf. Thanks a lot for that. If I remember correctly, they found blood evidence in all the vehicles, on all the vehicles, inside all the vehicles, on the side of the Range Rover, which is in the garage, inside the Chevy Suburban, and you can imagine if you put a dead body in that car, but let's say even with garbage bags, and the bicycles on top of that, you can imagine how you're going to have evidence transfer in a messy situation like that with the bicycle as well, which is also why I think he got rid of the bicycle. I think that the bicycle was also covered in blood. And I think someone who's a first-time murderer may think committing a crime with a knife is a great idea, but the amount of blood is virtually impossible to completely clean up. And that is the mistake that he made. That's the mistake I think the Idaho 4 killer made as well. There's also so much blood evidence in the O.J. Simpson case. But in any event, that is how he got there, by using someone else's vehicle and his bicycle. And the bicycle had to be gotten rid of because there was so much blood on it as well. Okay. Next section. So in the mid 2010s, the family moved into what would be their final home, a brick colonial measuring over 14,000 square feet at 4 Jefferson Crossing in Farmington. So what does that tell you? Even though it was probably her money that bought that house, she ends up moving out. That's how spoiled he is. He ends up staying in this house, and she ends up moving out. The marriage continued to deteriorate. DULOS's parents moved to the States, and then something very tragic happened that possibly Fotis blamed someone for. Anyone know what happened? Fotis's parents move into the picture, and then guess what happened? His own mother got run over by a vehicle belonging to Jennifer. Does anyone know what that vehicle was? Which vehicle? Sorry, Tammy. Does anyone know which vehicle ran over Fotis's mother? I don't know if that's going to come up easily in a Google search. So Fotis's mother, Cleopatra Doulos, how's that for a Greek name? 77 years old. She was run over in the driveway of her Connecticut home by the family's 24-year-old nanny. Right, that's this article. Let's try and get to the headline. Did you guys know that? I'm just trying to see if this article says which vehicle it was. The crash happened after the septuagenarian asked the nanny to move a Land Rover for one of the kids to climb into. Doulos bent down near the front of the car to make sure the lights were turning on. She heard a noise, didn't think anything of it, and that was how it happened. Police said they don't think it's a criminal event, but now you can almost see why the temptation to commit a crime in a garage with a vehicle there would be something that perhaps the perpetrator had fantasized about. Three months later, police learned that Doulos had died as a result of the accident and went back to interview the driver, who was still employed by the family. I assumed that she had moved far away from the vehicle, but apparently she had fallen down next to the vehicle and out of my sight, the nanny reportedly told cops. So she assumed that Fotis's mother had fallen over, but she thought it was somewhere else. She said, I pulled forward and heard one of the grandchildren scream. The nanny said she found Cleopatra injured and unconscious in the driveway, and Jennifer called 911. So kind of got a little bit of a Alex Murdaugh feel to this. Remember with the housekeeper that died, except this is the nanny killing Fotis's mother, but apparently in a freak accident. Fotis was also questioned. He told the cops he was in Italy at the time. So he had been to Italy, so the Rome thing isn't completely random. And interestingly, he said his mom fell down a flight of stairs and cracked her head a couple of months before the accident and was still taking painkillers. I was told by my wife that 3 days before the accident, when I was in Italy, Cleopatra lost consciousness a couple of times and fell to the floor. When asked, he also told cops his mom had no assets or property of value. It doesn't say anything about the vehicle that actually drove her over, but if it was to get around the Land Rover, then it could really only have been one of two vehicles. So could it have been that Chevy Suburban, the one that he eventually kind of gets rid, takes her body in? And so the question is, according to court documents, the pair allegedly left a trail of items stained in Jennifer's blood in roadside trash cans after she was beaten in her own garage. Okay. So what I'm suggesting is that Fotis, as the tension of the divorce ratcheted up, as the pressure of the finances built up, did he not start to resent Jennifer for all these other things that he may have accused her of or suspected of her of? In other words, although Jennifer wasn't driving the car, it was her car. Although it was the nanny that did this, it was Jennifer's nanny. And Jennifer never fired the nanny and things like that. And so all of that would be a reminder that although you didn't commit this crime, it was in your home and you were there when my mother lost her life. I blame you. And so he kind of gets revenge on that as well by putting her in the car, possibly, that killed his mother. Can you see how it's not necessarily logical or sensible or reasonable, but there's nevertheless a psychological, perhaps intertextuality going on in his mind that makes sense to him. In the same way, if you say, I don't want to spend an hour in jail for a crime I didn't commit, I mean, isn't that another way of simply saying, I did commit this crime, I'm not going to spend an hour in jail, and so this is how I get out of it? You know, it's somebody who doesn't necessarily think in a logical way, but it certainly is insistent in how he thinks about things. I don't know. If you think about Barry Morphew and also Shanann Watts and Chris Watts, it's not unusual when things reach that critical point that there might be sort of desperate text saying, please don't do this. Yeah, revenge, justification. Okay. So here's another article dealing with that. Mother of Connecticut husband arrested in connection with his wife's disappearance. She died in a freak accident after being run over by a Land Rover driven by the couple's 24-year-old nanny. Police had been called to the family's former home on Deercliff Road for a medical complaint. The nanny's name was Evangelia Niora. Seems like possibly a Greek nanny. And there's all that information. Oh, so it is the Land Rover. I thought they'd made a mistake with it being the Range Rover. So it looks like they did eventually get rid of this vehicle. But can you see how there's a repeat of the whole garage car crime scene thing going on? Someone is killed in their garage, and the same thing then happens with Jennifer. And incidentally, Fotis himself also died in a garage. He used the whole carbon monoxide thing. So he also died in a garage. So let's have a closer look at this image. Her clothing did not appear to be damaged in a fashion consistent with a pedestrian being dragged under the vehicle. The Deercliff home is a short walk from the Jefferson Crossing mansion. As far as I know, Fotis's parents were living in the Deercliff home. That's how I understand it. So this is Fotis being escorted from his home. He was arrested. He does kind of have the build of a cyclist, doesn't he? And that's actually a camelback. Looked like to me like a camelback. It's the sort of thing a cyclist would use. There is Michelle Draconis. Looks like she's got a dog on a leash there. What vehicle is that? Isn't that the... Can you see what kind of vehicle that is? Oh, we know that they rented a Yukon. I don't know if that is that vehicle, but that is a Yukon. Interesting. Okay, some other pictures of Jennifer DULOS. It just gives you a better idea of her home and the location of the park, really around the. And so the question we would want to ask is that within cycling range of the park? If he dropped off the Toyota Tacoma here and then cycled to her house and then drove back, is that within cycling range? And I think the answer is yes. That really doesn't look far. Do you agree? It really doesn't look too far. He definitely was dressed in an odd way as well, like almost like wearing a hoodie while riding a bike. Okay. Let's move on. So that's quite incredible that his mother died in quite tragic circumstances in quite late, at the same time that the marriage was deteriorating. This is what happened. You can imagine that didn't help their marriage. Then Jennifer's father developed complications from an autoimmune disease. So his mother died, and her father got sick. And so Faber tried to hold down the house. Doulos became more absent. I'm reading from the um, Vanity Fair article. Doulos became more absent. He would go on water skiing trips for as many as 10 days a month. He wanted the big life, to ski and travel on the private plane of his best friend's dad. He didn't want a depressed wife. He didn't want a depressed wife spending more and more time in her third floor attic library, nose in her books. You kind of get the idea that he doesn't want to grieve. He doesn't want to deal with things. He just wants to have fun. He just wants to enjoy himself. He can't deal with things that aren't the things that he wants. Yeah. And so when you are going after a fairy tale with that misplaced sense of reality, how good are you at dealing with reality when reality foists itself on you? When it's like all of these motions and you're in a courtroom and then you commit a crime. That's another way of dealing with reality, by not dealing with it. And then you've got to deal with that, and you can't deal with that either. And then how does he escape that? So you do get the idea of someone who doesn't really want to be accountable for anything, don't you? Casey says the nanny sure has stories to tell about their DV in the home. Yeah, so Fotis, what's incredible about Fotis, I'm not going to show this on my channel, but there's a helicopter flying above his house when he is brought out of his vehicle, out the garage, into the drive, when they perform CPR on him. And then they even place a tent above him while they're waiting for the emergency services to arrive. So he actually survives that whole thing, the whole carbon monoxide poisoning. He goes to the hospital where he's still alive, and I think in the end they had to turn off the ventilator. So it wasn't like he died. They saved him, resuscitated him, and he was still alive. But the carbon monoxide had done so much damage that that was the outcome. But that is the thing. He never took accountability. So another part that I've highlighted here, let's just go to another section of this article. Where is it? So what's quite interesting is it can feel like your life is a fairy tale while it's going the way you want it to go. And then when it's not going the way you want it to go, it might be quite hard to get used to the idea that this is real. It's like, but I'm used to things being the way that I want it to be. I'm used to things being good. I'm used to things being fun. I'm used to things being a pleasure. And then suddenly when it's not that way, it's like, did I really just commit murder? Am I really caught up in this mess with 300 motions? And so because you can't deal with reality, that fairy tale becomes a complete nightmare. Because when you're living in a fairy tale, you're not very good at dealing with real life. And so if you're not very good at dealing with real life within a fairy tale, you're not very good at dealing with a nightmare even more so. Which is why the answer in a situation like that is to wake up, get out of your fairy tale, come out of your denial. And the only way you can improve your life is in the real world, in real time, authentically, right? Okay, so the next section here reads as follows. This is also from the Vanity Fair article. While he did not engage in the machinations of literature's worst husband, so although he wasn't the worst husband in the world, DULOS also began denigrating some of Faber's friends and encouraging her to cut them out of her life. Now, this to me is also the kind of thing a narcissist does. A narcissist wants control over you. A narcissist wants their lives their way, and they don't want someone challenging the way they want things done. And so they try to isolate you. And you can kind of imagine how if she had done that, that it's an easier way to get away with murder because she's lost her friends. She's cut them off. She's right. And in the end, it was a friend who created the situation of calling 911. A friend of hers wanted to know where she was, and that's how the police came to the scene. And if it had taken a little bit longer, who knows, those the evidence in the trash may have been lost. If it had taken longer for a friend to care about their friend, it could have taken longer. And that's why I do think narcissism, as much as I'm allergic to talking about it in true crime, I do think it is relevant in this case. Fortunately for Jennifer, her father, even though he was not in great health, was becoming increasingly concerned about DULOS's escalating aggression, which included punching out a parking lot attendant at her parents' apartment building, according to the New York Post. So you can see he is behaving more and more like a petulant child, right? He's becoming more verbally aggressive, is becoming more physically aggressive, and also the walls are moving in. His debt is $7 million, and the whole legal thing is sort of moving in. What does Sally say? A troll covered in slime. He's also becoming more controlling of his own children, particularly when he was training them in water skiing. And this led to Jennifer saying about the children. She said, "The children have told me that they do not want to water ski at this level." So even the children are starting to feel controlled, pressured, like pawns in their father's game, in their father's fairy tale. Right? He said, "They are physically and emotionally exhausted. They beg me to do something about it. And we are all terrified to disobey my husband." And so this is where you get the sense of this guy who looks like a charming, suave fellow, is actually like a spoiled child. Michelle says, "I'm at the beginning, I'm late. I'm so glad you're covering this case. Thanks for that." It is a big red flag. Heidi says, "This is crazy. Red flags everywhere, for sure." Then, unfortunately, her father dies in 2017. That is Jennifer's. And after that happened, Jennifer learned that DULOS was not a Rochester who would end up a hero in their relationship. He was having an affair. Right? This is a quote from Vanity Fair. And let me ask you this question. Do you think the death of her father, now bear in mind she had to have inherited something from her father, do you think that at the same time that they are having marital problems figures into the criminal psychology? In other words, I owe 7 million. I've been borrowing money from my wife's father all along. Well, now I need that money not from the father, but from her directly. But she doesn't really like me very much. What am I going to do about this? Absolutely. Right? So he dies at a very crucial time in the whole timeline. His mother's died, Fotis's mother's died. Now her father dies, and her father kind of leaves her with kind of a double inheritance. The one inheritance is, he says, don't be treated second best, and that's what she does. But she also probably inherits quite a lot of money, and he knows that. And what is the thing that preceded um, Suzanne Morphew's death? Well, the death of her, I think it was her mother and her grandmother, something like that. Her mother and her grandmother died, and then her father died shortly after she died. And who do you think was sitting on the sidelines there with financial troubles, and and how similar is that case to this case? Bear in mind, this case and all the events in this case preceded the Morphew case by about a year. And so at the time that her father has died, he's having an affair. Do you think he's very emotionally available for her at a time that she probably needs him? And so within this whole situation, all of this natural, let's call it a natural convey of tensions, or that is the situation into which Michelle Troconis steps in. She's from Venezuela. She sometimes worked as a marketing manager for high-end resorts. So if you're a dude who is constantly traveling around the world, you're constantly going to these elite water skiing world championships. Well, someone who works at this high level in hotels can make bookings for you. You know, can arrange that side of your what do you call it? Your accommodation, right? That's the one side of it. She can also write articles on his achievements, and she can contact ESPN and say, "Hey, don't you want to interview my boyfriend? Don't you want to interview his kids? They're just about to take part in this or that." She was also an advanced water skier with a teenage daughter from a previous marriage. So that's what we kind of want to talk about in the next analysis, which we'll do tomorrow, is what was motivating Michelle. And obviously, greed is the simple answer. But beyond the greed, she's also got a child. She's also someone who's a water skier at an advanced level. She also has a teenage daughter, and she may be feeling certain feelings regarding her previous marriage, where when Fotis tells her, "This is the woman I'm dealing with," maybe it makes her feel quite angry and indignant based on what she's experienced. Who knows? Someone says that I bet that he felt that he was in more control with her father out of the picture. And I do think it's a valid question to ask. Do you think Fotis would have committed this murder while her father was still alive, knowing that he could bring these legal resources to bear for and on behalf of his daughter? Do you think he would have committed the crime with the patriarchal lion, as it were, still in the picture? And so, you've kind of got to look at the situation that Fotis was in vis-a-vis Jennifer and vis-a-vis Michelle. And Michelle's lost her father, and she's not really a sporting person, and she's kind of mourning. Whereas Michelle, there's no baggage, as it were. Michelle, except I guess her teenage daughter, if you want to be nasty about it. What I mean is, the one woman is beautiful, but kind of grieving, which is a bit of a downer for this guy who doesn't want to deal with things. Whereas the other woman is very similar, but she's not grieving and she's sporty. And so he makes his choice. He just chooses, I don't really really want to deal with this. Let's deal with that. And I would be very interested to know how Fotis actually dealt with the death of his mother. Did he take it hard? Did he just not really even think about it? I'd be interested to know. Doulos told Faber he'd fallen out of love with her, but still wanted Faber and the children to remain with him. That's quite interesting. So if you think that the narcissism thing is a bit much, like, you know what, it's still a label. I don't know if you should be throwing around labels like that. Get this. Again, this is from the Vanity Fair article. Even though Doulos tells his wife, I'm not in love with you anymore. He kind of says, I still think we should live together. I still think we should be with the kids, both of us. And do you mind if Michelle comes and lives with us, basically with me, and her daughter? How's that for wanting the cake and eating it, right? He still wants Faber and the children to remain with him, and says, can Michelle and her daughter come and stay with us as well? In other words, I want to stay married to you, but can my girlfriend, who I do love, can she stay with us? That's really wanting your cake and eating it, doesn't it? And in other words, he wants the spigot, he wants the cash flow to continue. That's really his incentive. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Okay, so I'm going to take you guys just quickly through some of these images. So the amazing thing with this dude on the bicycle is they found evidence of the bicycle in the trash receptacles, and they also found things like a poncho. The idea I got with the poncho was it was almost like he was wearing a raincoat when he committed the crime in order to not get any blood on himself. And do you remember he was described as having a fastidious appearance? That's a fastidious killer trying to, in his mind, cleverly execute a crime, but in the end not doing it particularly cleverly. We've seen that image, and this is the woman that he chose to be with instead of Jennifer. Again, a sign of this, what do you call it, of this narcissistic personalities. He says, why do I always get the raw end of the stick? That's what he asked the judge, right? So according to the article, Doulos could not have expected that he would come out the victor in any of the legal matters as a father who had an affair, as a father who bought a gun, as a father who had benefited greatly from the Faber family wealth. Yet he seems to have been unprepared for exactly how many pegs he would be taken down. In other words, he couldn't accept that he would need to lower the standard of his lifestyle, that he would need to what's the word? What do they call it? Something downscale, downsize. He'd need to kind of literally downsize his lifestyle from that huge mansion to something else. And I can tell you, I kind of went through a similar thing. I hope you guys don't mind me indulging in this aspect. I remember when I lived in Johannesburg and worked as a reporter or as a communication specialist. I was kind of also working as a freelance journalist at the same time. But I remember I lived not far from a friend of mine who's really wealthy, and we do things together, and it would feel like I was part of his, what do they call it? The sort of class that he occupied, let's say, call it the upper class, almost like the upper class. And so we'd go to a bicycle event and they'd stay in a particular hotel and whatever. And because you were participating with him, you'd sort of feel like, oh, you're part of that as well, except you weren't. You weren't part of that. There's a little bit more to say in that respect, but I remember when I lost my job at this media company, I then very quickly realized I'm going to have to move somewhere else. I had this beautiful cottage, stone cottage, on a hillside overlooking the city, and I kind of realized I'm going to need to work as a freelancer, to be a freelance photojournalist. I'm going to be earning a lot less for a long period. I'm not going to be able to afford to live here. And so that was a very bitter pill to swallow, is that this type of life that I've had, the gym that I've been going to, the friends that I've been hanging out with, I'm going to lose all of that simply because I can't afford it. It's a very horrible thing to realize. And there's a part of you that does desperately want to hang on to it. But if you don't have the money, then it can be quite difficult. And that's the situation he was in, where he was being forced to realize that he's going to have to downsize. And it must be even harder to downsize when everything in your life is supersized, right? It's not just like I had quite a nice house and a cottage, but certainly wasn't a huge mansion. I went from that to anyway, it's not terribly pleasant memories. And so he's saying, why do I always get the raw end of the stick? And the weird thing is, well, he'd been getting the happy end of the leading edge of a happy life for so long. And then he said, both he and Faber were rattled by the length and intensity of the court battles. The divorce records include more than 300 motions. And this is why I say the lawyers milked this case very, very nicely. The lawyers made hay out of this. Even Jennifer, she didn't want to draw this out, but I guess the lawyers were definitely spinning straw into gold, right? The divorce records 300 motions. When a judge learned that Doulos had hung out with the Choran and Troconis and his mistress at the same time, that was a rule that had been given. These are the custody conditions, and then he just broke them. Well, none of that applies to me. I live in my own fairy tale. I don't have to listen to any judge or whatever. And then when that happened, he told the kids to lie about it to their mother, right? And so his visits with the children were curtailed. That gives you a potential insight into Troconis's involvement in the murder of Jennifer Doulos and the cover-up, which is you're with someone, but just lie about it, and that's how you'll deal with it. Just lie about it. He instructed the kids to lie about it to their mother, and it didn't quite work out. He was then punished because he was found out. It began to seem like at the end of the legal process, Doulos would not only lose custody, but go bankrupt. And so someone who's lived his life so large, on such a grand canvas, had these fantastic adventures, this rich, exciting life of water skiing and new romance and all of this kind of thing. Even his kids are sharing in that adventure. To go from that to a prison cell, which was something he simply couldn't live with. He simply couldn't imagine it. On May 24, 2019, 2 years after the divorce began, DULOS woke up, and this is where that grainy image of the bicycle comes in. Right? It's here at the bottom. 2 years into this draining war of attrition that this divorce had kind of become, he woke up at 4:20 a.m. and an hour later he drove someone else's red Toyota Tacoma. Let this guy take the fall to a preserve near the Faber's home. DULOS grabbed a vintage Mercier French racing bike from the back of the garage. Where's the rest of that? In the New Canaan garage, according to prosecutors, DULOS restrained Faber with 4 zip ties around her wrists and feet. And what that tells me is, if that's true, that he actually wanted to torture her. It wasn't enough just to kill her. He wanted to take pleasure at her expense. There was a sadistic element to it. And maybe part of that was he wanted information from her. What is the password to your phone? What's the password to your computer? Where's this money? Where's that? Sign this, sign that. DULOS allegedly stabbed her with a murder weapon that is yet to be located. So the feeling from the authorities, although they know that he had a Glock and he'd bought a Glock in this critical 2-year period, they feel that she was stabbed. After rummaging in her closets for 10 rolls of paper and using them to clean up, he loaded Faber's body and his bike into the Suburban and drove back to the preserve. He left the lights on in the Suburban, and bear in mind, when his mother died, she apparently was looking at the lights, looking to see whether the lights were coming on, and that was when she was killed. He leaves the lights on in the Suburban to make it appear as if Faber had left the car hurriedly. It's just an interesting thing that he would think about that. Then prosecutors believe he threw his bike in the back of the Tacoma with Faber's body, and he was back in Farmington to meet Draconis by 1:37 p.m. And so I do think the bicycle is an analogy. A bicycle is quite a large object. Whatever happened to the bicycle, it's possible that something similar happened to Draconis. Now, one thing that you may or may not be aware of, not sure if it was investigators, not sure who it was, but someone stumbled on a deep hole that was dug behind, what is it? It was in some kind of club area. Not sure if it was the water skiing. I really can't quite remember the details. I don't know where this hole was, but they found this freshly dug hole in the days before Michelle died. And next to it, they found bags of lime. Now, if you ask yourself, what potentially could those bags of lime be used for? Well, to destroy the odor of someone that is underneath that, potentially. So this is going back to that. He pedaled to Faber's home at around 7:30 a.m. So he obviously got up when it was still dark, drove the Toyota Tacoma to the preserve, then pedaled to Faber's home, got there at that time. We still don't know how he got in, or if he followed her in. Faber was dropping off the kids at school at 8:05. She pulled into the driveway in a Suburban, then drove into the garage, the door closing via remote behind her. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if when the door closed, he slipped in. Did DULOS intend to kill his wife then and there? He not only allegedly brought along black tape and husky gloves, so allegedly, can you guys see that? Allegedly, when he entered the house, when he was cycling there, he brought with him black tape, husky gloves, among other items, a poncho. And the poncho, I think, definitely suggests a stabbing type attack rather than a using a firearm. The day before, he had been in contact with Kent Mawini's attorney in the civil suit with Faber's mother. DULOS had recently called Mawini's wife to ask if she would be willing to meet with Mawini to talk at one of DULOS's homes. So ultimately, they found some items covered in blood or bloodied that belonged to Jennifer, and one of them was an extra small Vineyard Vines shirt. Now, where does that ring a bell? Can you think of another case that involves a Vineyard Vines shirt? Anyone have any ideas? How good is your attention to detail? Good answers. Murder, absolutely. So Alex Murder was looking for he called it a Vinnie Vine shirt when he spoke to their housekeeper. I'm not sure if that was the shirt he wore when he committed the crime, but it does come up in the Alec Murdoch case. Can you see this? Murdoch housekeeper says Alex pressured her. He asked her whether she remembered the Vinnie Vines, the Vineyard Vines shirt he was wearing the day of the murders. So quite a strange, unexpected intertextuality there, right? Okay. What's next? Where was I? So she says the alibi is even questionable too, meaning not only Fotis's alibi, but Michelle's as well. And this part reminds me a little bit of the Amanda Knox case, where you have Amanda Knox saying that she was with Raphael when the crime happened, and Raphael Solensky saying the same thing. He's saying he was with her, she's saying she was with him. And the same thing here. You have them saying that they were in the shower together that morning, they had sex. And so, in a weird way, she's his alibi, right? And in a weird way now, he's her alibi. Or to some extent, she says they did something, but she didn't know. He did something, but she didn't know, right? So I just find that quite interesting. Authorities found crumpled pieces of paper at Fort Jefferson Crossing with what they called alibi scripts, or the exact chain of events Draconis insisted on to the police. She said she'd only made the notes to jog her memory at DULOS's former attorney's prompting. Do you think that that's true? While it was likely beginning to dawn on DULOS that he was in quite a bit of trouble, the kids had been whisked out of Connecticut to Gloria's apartment in Manhattan. That's one of our questions. Who's Gloria? Who is Gloria? Right? And the answer is that she is the guardian of the kids. She is Jennifer's mother. Oh, here it is. Here's that hole. This is the information about the hole. Just kind of make that a bit bigger. 6 days before Jennifer's death, 2 members of a gun and rod club Mawini belonged to stumbled on a hole 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 3 feet deep in the woods behind the club. And this is where I think the suggestion comes in, could this lawyer be in on the whole thing? And that's not really the ambit of what we're talking about here. But the question is, was this hole used? Who dug the hole? And ultimately, was Jennifer buried in a hole that had been prepared ahead of time? The issue here is that people found this hole that it was already dug. So that, did they go and dig a hole somewhere else? 2 bags of unopened lime sat within it. When one of those members checked out the hole 2 days before Faber's disappearance, the bags of lime were gone. Mawini's attorney did not comment when asked about this chain of events. There's just another picture of this big house in the Jefferson Road area. Is it called Jefferson Road? Where Fotis was staying, where Michelle was staying. And that's where she was staying, and this house was rented. And I must say, for me, if there's any image that captures this whole story, like in one picture, it's this one, which is you've got this idyllic house. You've got this beautiful, beautiful house in the woods in Connecticut. And everything seems so perfect about it, except, well, there's a black police vehicle, right? In the middle of this fairy tale is an easy to forget about nightmare that was brewing. That picture really, to me, represents the whole case in a nutshell. So we dealt with it, water skiing. There is Fotis with 2 of his kids. You can see all of the medals. 2016 National Water Ski Championship. There's another kid with the face that is blocked out in action. You can see it's also on a single ski, like their dad. Looks like there's a big house here with another one. I'm not sure if it's a different. Is that where the housekeeper stays? I'm not quite sure. And so that was when they were a happy couple until that happened. And so that's where we are now. There's no prosecution really of Fotis. He's out of the picture. So the question is, what does she know? What did she do? She clearly didn't commit the crime, right? Clearly she didn't shoot Jennifer, didn't stab Jennifer, wasn't even at the house, more than likely. But it's, I think, a similar situation potentially to Laurie Vallow. Are you in trouble for a particular crime, even if you didn't commit the crime yourself? And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think Michelle is as culpable as Laurie Vallow. In other words, I don't know if, I mean, it's an open question. Was it Michelle's idea? What was this whole murder Michelle's idea? What do you think? In the Laurie Vallow case, it's easy to imagine that it was Laurie's idea and Chad maybe went along with it, or Chad encouraged it, or Chad reinforced it. But I certainly think in the Laurie Vallow case, Laurie was the ringleader. Laurie was the mastermind. In terms of this case, who do you think was the mastermind? Fotis or Michelle or a lawyer or somebody else? I don't think so either. I don't think it was her idea. And I think that already is, if that's true, and if the jury think this as well, then that might give her a little bit of mitigation. If she's found guilty and if she's sentenced, the fact that she wasn't the person driving all of this might be, to some extent, mitigating. I agree. And so we're going to be dealing with that in the next analysis tomorrow. What do you think was Michelle's motive? If she is culpable in some way, what would her motive possibly be? Chelsea says accessory after the fact. It does seem to me quite heartless if it's true. If she was driving with Fotis, he's disposing of bags in 30 containers, it does seem particularly heartless to be going along with him and helping him clean the vehicle. It does seem quite heartless. But Crystal Kenny got barely 3 years, although she was part of a plea bargain. She got 3 years for her role as an accessory after the fact in the Patrick Frazee case. If Michelle is found guilty, I can't imagine it being less than 3 years. That's a good question. What was going on in her mind? What was her motivation? Jalsi says she was under his spell. So that is, in a way, one of the biggest mysteries besides where is Jennifer's body, right? What was going on in the mind of Michelle Troconis? Anyway, so we're now back to the 12 questions. So what we're going to do now is, I'm not going to type them out now. I'm going to ask you the question and see if you guys have got the answer. And then I want you to look at the answer that you originally put, and we're going to see how much we've learned. So the first question, did the cops find evidence in trash cans? Do you think they can prove conspiracy? I do think an important way to prove it without besides the CCTV, besides the going to clean the vehicle and being with him when he made those trash runs, I think what's going to be quite important is cell phone evidence. What did she say to him? And again, is there motive? What is in it for her to help him in this regard? Okay, so the first question, what do you guys say? The first question is, did the cops find evidence in the trash cans? Terry, thanks for being with us. Nice to have you with us. Take care. Wherever you're going, take care. And I'm not sure if I should say keep warm. I'm not sure. Isn't it quite warm in California at the moment? So the answer is yes, but it's also, so what did they find? Well, for example, they found the, vineyard, Vineyard Vines T-shirt. They found her, it's not the Infinity, but Infini something bra that she was wearing. They found the logo of the bicycle. They found quite a lot. Right? So the answer is they did find quite a lot of evidence in the trash cans. Another interesting question is, did they find traces of Jennifer DULOS's blood in the evidence in the trash cans? I can't say that for a fact, but I think the answer is yes. So that's the first question. Number two, how many custody motions were there? How many motions were there during the divorce? Do you guys know the answer? DNA, okay. 300 plus, and I mean that gives you an idea of the intensity of this legal shitstorm and the pressure that he was under, and this was adding to the financial pressure, because every one of these motions you'd have to call up your lawyer, and the lawyer would add all of these conversations and interactions and appearances to the bill. That would be added to, what do they call them, the billing, and easily $1 million of Fotis DULOS's debt, if not twice that amount, would have gone just into legal fees, right? What does Velas say? They found that the leash was wet in the garden. I don't think it had, it wasn't from San Francisco Bay. They found the leash in the garden. Okay, next question. What was the murder weapon, knife or gun? And this is not an absolute answer. I don't think it's actually wrong if you said gun. It could be a gun, but I think it's more likely we have a situation like this of so much blood and those ties. It's more likely a knife situation, and also someone who is kind of got a vendetta, a personal vendetta against his victim. You know, it's not just the legal battle and the financial debt, it's also the fact that his mother died in a garage, you know, kind of thing. Yeah, we can't be sure. I do think the right answer there is a knife. I do think that. So if you get 11 answers right and knife, you can basically give yourself a potential 12 out of 12. Do you agree? Number 4, where did they meet? Let's have a look at where the stats are. 65% said at Brown, then later in Aspen. A third of you are 100% right. If you said in Greenwich Village, that makes sense because that's where they lived originally. Certainly that's where Jennifer lived originally. Central Park's around the corner. No, they didn't meet in Rome. So 2/3 of you were definitely on the right track in terms of that. So what happened was they met at Brown University. She was instantly attracted to him. She remembered him, and then they bumped into each other again in Aspen, and that's where their relationship took off. He was recovering from a divorce at the time, and met her. Number 5, how much was he in debt? And again, it's quite interesting to compare his debt to Alex Murdaugh. How much was Alex Murdaugh in debt? Well, I don't know how much Alex Murdaugh was in debt, but they feel like he stole close to $10 million. It says here that in his plea agreement, it resolved charges and a loss of $8.8 million. And that's the same kind of money that Fotis DULOS was involved in. He had over $7 million in debt. Now, when you have that kind of money and you've been living so large, it's quite a toxic mix. You're used to getting away with things. The law doesn't apply to you because you're such a special person living such a special life. And so you're not going to pay the piper. You never have, and you're not going to do it now. So it's a substantial amount of money, and he probably wasn't going to be able to afford a lawyer either. He was going to have to get a public defender probably. Then what did he say in the note that he wrote before he died about time? He said, I'm not going to spend 1 hour in prison for a crime I didn't commit, which tells you all you need to know about Fotis DULOS. It tells you that there was a guy who probably did commit this crime, and he wasn't going to spend an hour in prison for it. That's it. Okay. The next one, question 7, was her house. Did Jennifer Farber, did she own this house? Let's see what you guys say. This is question number 7. Did Jennifer Farber own this house? So bear in mind, that's where she was staying when she died. Did she actually own this house? So she was staying in a rented house. That's right. Yvonne, good to see you. Nice picture of you there. She was renting a house, whereas Fotis was staying in this really huge mansion. And I don't really know, I don't think that he was renting it, but he was certainly living larger than she was on basically her father's ticket. Number 8, who is Gloria? Who's Gloria? Who is Gloria? A little bit more information about Gloria. Gloria stays in, I think, Greenwich Village, and this is her, right? And she is Jennifer DULOS's mother. Bear in mind, she lost her father in 2017. So her mother is the guardian. Her mother also wanted Jennifer declared deceased because her mother is, I think her mother's in her 80s, and her mother is a little bit concerned that it normally takes 7 years to declare someone deceased and legally, and Jennifer has been missing for 5 years now, and her mother's just wanted her to be declared deceased for the children's benefit. I also think it's to do with the legal proceedings against Michelle Troconis, because without Jennifer being legally declared dead, I think there'd be a little bit of a legal dilemma in accusing someone of being an accessory to a murder without knowing for sure that that person was dead. So, and that happened about 3 days ago. Jennifer DULOS officially declared dead after 2019 disappearance. Okay. Next question. So who is Gloria? It's Jennifer's mother. Number 9, and it's the guardian of the 5 DULOS children. Number 9, is it true that DULOS's mother was run over in Connecticut by the nanny? And the answer is yes. I don't know the exact date, probably somewhere around 2015, somewhere around there. DULOS's mother, Cleopatra, was run over by, I think she was 77, she was run over by a 24-year-old nanny. I'm not sure what vehicle was driven. Number 10, but you can imagine that there would be some perhaps resentment from Fotis regarding that. And it's really interesting that there's a parallel to that and the crime scene. Is there a psychological conscious or subconscious link between the two? Number 10, do we know what she was wearing on the day of her death? Do we know what Jennifer Faber was wearing on the day of her death? We've kind of already touched on that. Oh, was it that white Land Rover? I thought they were trying to move the Land Rover for another vehicle. Was it the Land Rover that was moved? Okay, 2010. So the 10th question is, do we know what she was wearing? And the answer is the Vineyard Vine shirt, and there was also a bra. The bra starts like infina something. Here's the article. Let's do it like that. Shirt, bra, missing Connecticut mom found. Timmy, let's go down. Karen Sanderson from Wisconsin. Good to see you here. Pleasure. What was in the sewer? As far as I can remember, wasn't it license plates? The shirt was stained with her blood, and there was a bra and cleaning supplies with blood. So it's actually amazing how much they found. You know, it's not just a shirt, the shirt with blood on it, not just that, but also cleaning supplies. It just seems like a very messy crime scene, doesn't it? Investigators say they received more than 1,200 tips, dozens of surveillance videos. Just want to see if I can get this video to load. Not quite sure why it's doing this. Let's close a couple of windows. Here's another article. Missing mom of 5 declared dead ahead of trial for woman accused of murder cover-up. Her body was never found, but based on evidence of her blood in her garage and elsewhere, the medical examiner determined that she suffered injuries that would have been non-survivable. Oh, she's 88 years old. Okay. Yeah, 2 years might be quite long to wait for the official thing. What's quite amazing is, according to Connecticut state statutes, a person can be presumed dead 17 years after going missing. Well, you know, Madeleine McCann has been missing more than twice that long now. Not 14 years, but going on to 17 years, right? This year will be the 17th year. Okay, it looks like this is not going to play. Not going to play. Okay, and then there's also this article, media removed. a Vineyard Vines t-shirt, bra, 2 mops, and some sponges stained with blood, confirmed to be that of Connecticut mom Jennifer DULOS. So now it's very easy to imagine what is going on in that garage. Mops, sponges, and so on. The items were found in a black contractor bag as police searched along Albany Avenue. So the disposal of that evidence all happened around about after sunset, starting from about 7 p.m. on the day that she disappeared. This is going to be interesting. I don't know if we'll get all the information in court in this trial, but authorities have not released an official accounting of what was in the bloody bags. So we don't know completely everything that was in those bags. Fotis had twice accused Jennifer of trying to frame him for her disappearance, saying her going missing was a ploy to keep him from their children. That I must say, that's a really cynical thing to say, is she's dead, she's disappeared, and he's saying, well, she's trying to frame me, you know. Anyway, so let's go on to the 11th question. Was there a hole that was discovered, and what was next to the hole? Anyone get that answer right? And I couldn't help thinking, you know, when you're dealing with a guy whose job is construction, what's the likeliest way is going to get rid of a body, right? And that is the right answer. And I can't help thinking limes is the lime is meant to destroy the odor. That was the point of that. So you kind of got someone who's premeditated this. He thinks he's thought of everything, but he still ends up making kind of a mess in terms of the execution of the crime. He really does a pretty horrible job. And then the 12th question, Troconis, did she have a child? And the answer is yes, she's got a teenage daughter. So it's now time to look at your notes. I hope you took some. What I want to know from you is, how many questions did you get right in the beginning of this live, and how many did you get right at the end? So see if you can add those up. Gina, thanks for your honesty. Gina says, I got the lime question wrong. And you're right, it is a narcissist, yeah. So do a quick calculation. I hope some of you, up there, at least 5 of you who took notes. How many questions did you get right in the beginning? And how many did you get right now? Sally says, my dog ate my notes. Okay. Wow, that's pretty cool. So Zircon says, I didn't get any right in the beginning, and then 12 out of 12. That's pretty cool. Chelsea says 7 out of 13. That's not bad. That's not bad. That's at least half of them. And that's just the point of this this live, was to educate ourselves on the case in a interesting way. And I think we've learned a lot in many dimensions. The real dynamics that are taking place, the real tensions, not just financial, but other tensions as well. And we've also gotten to know, while we're doing this, some of the facts of the case. Earth says, I only got 6 right at the beginning. Eastern Kiewit says I got 12 right at the end. That's good to hear. Kami Bochette, are you related to, what's her name? Oh, it's Bochette, not Blanchette. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Sally says this is harder than Jeopardy. You get prizes on that show. Okay. Okay, there's a nice double answer. Yvonne says I got 7 at the beginning and about 11 at the end. And the whole thing was I wanted you to realize what you didn't know, and then at the end be invested in what you do know, right? Anyone else? Stephanie? Alf says I wasn't here in the beginning, got the poll question wrong off the bat. Okay. Okay. If you, by the way, if you're watching this in after the fact, please participate as well, and please leave your answers in the comments. Also, if you're watching this and on replay, you can also hit the thanks button, right? Kimchi says 3 and 8, but I was cleaning. I was distracted. Okay. Kimchi, I'd expect higher marks from you because you always know so much. So next time, higher marks, right? Earth says very educational. Okay, so what I'm going to do following this live is I'm going to be putting up an analysis of what I call the football narrative in the Madeleine McCann case. Now, I can see eyes rolling, and in the same way that you could say, you know what, there's either a water skiing narrative or a bicycle narrative in the Fotis DULOS case. If you don't know anything about the case, that may seem an absurd and silly thing. But when you actually pull on those strands, it's fascinating how much information comes out of that. And I do think a big reason why Fotis effed up the crime scene was because of the bicycle on her body. The combination of her body and the bicycle, and transferring that not only to one vehicle but to 2 vehicles. So transferring a bicycle and the body to the Chevy Suburban, then transferring both to the Toyota Tacoma. The chance of getting blood evidence in a knife type crime in places that you don't expect is huge. So it's not surprising that that is what happened. But in the same way that it seems silly, look how much information we got out of the very big puzzle piece that is the water skiing narrative. And in the Madeleine McCann case, you'll be surprised what a big puzzle piece football is in that narrative. What were the people doing at the time when Madeleine apparently disappeared? What was the reason the parents, the group of families, wanted to be somewhere doing whatever? What do you think they were busy with? And so when you pull on that strand in the Madeleine McCann case, it truly is fascinating. And you realize people and crimes aren't as one-dimensional as you think they are. They're actually very things that are common and current in our own lives, are also common and current in theirs. I don't know if you guys remember in the Chris Watts case, when the officer, what was her name? Wasn't her name Officer Lyons? When the officer entered the house, his television was on a sports show. Do you guys remember that? Do you guys know that the last thing that Chris Watts was doing, like if you look on his Twitter timeline, which is something that is often forgotten about, he was paying attention to Tiger Woods, I think, and a PGA Open being played. He liked to tweet about that. And then there was another one regarding, I think, a game that was being played in Colorado, I think a football game. Beck says, much love from blizzardy Canada. Well, it couldn't be more different here. Yeah, we've got blue skies, green everywhere, nice and warm. Yeah, I think he was watching a golf tournament. Yeah. Beck says, I love all the connections you make from various cases. I tuned in late. Thanks for all your hard work. And that's what we try and do, is we don't just try and figure out the forensics and the motive. We try and figure out how the fabric of one case relates to the fabric of another, and also how someone's psychology comes out of that fabric and also to some extent populates that fabric. And I find that the fascinating part of true crime, not the gratuitous shocking stuff, but the psychological narrative behind the crime. I always find that interesting. Chelsea says, thank you everyone for being here. It's been a very informative live. Okay. So I'm going to end off on that note. Thanks, mods, for being here. You guys have been great. Must say, chat's been very well behaved. I kind of had a way I was going to do this, but I ended up doing it a different way, kind of on the fly, and that turned out to be, I think, quite the right decision. Alf says, very cold here in Albuquerque. I don't know if you know this, but I drove very close to Albuquerque in November. I was literally, I stayed the night in Santa Fe, but I probably was less than 50 miles from Albuquerque. Sheila says 6 in the beginning, 2 at the end. You mean an extra 2 at the end? 4 in the beginning, 2 at the end. Okay. Zircon says, looking forward to tomorrow. Okay. Thanks, Stephanie. Again, wonderful to have Yvonne with us. And I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. So it'll probably be maybe a similar time to right now. So so that's the plan. Okay, so on that note, we'll be talking about the motive tomorrow. Thanks a lot for the super chats. Alpha now gave out a couple of memberships. Thanks a lot for that. And so I'm going to play out with this closing. All the best. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend.